My name is Elena. I'm 32, and in the storybook my family wrote for themselves, I'm the black sheep, even though, ironically, I'm the most successful one of the bunch. I arrived at my parents' 40th anniversary dinner at the Cliffside Manor, genuinely thrilled for a chance to finally bridge the gap between us. The look I received wasn't joy. You weren't invited, my father seethed. When I stood my ground, refusing to leave, he had security called. Get this panhandler out, he spat, completely oblivious to the fact that I'd footed the bill for half the entire event. I turned and walked away without a word. Then I pulled out my phone and systematically dismantled over $70,000 in financial support. It wasn't long before my phone erupted with notifications and a frantic pounding started on my front door. If you're watching this, I'd really like to know where you're from. Go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments if you've ever been made to feel like a stranger in your own family. Believe me, this is a story of family betrayal and discovering your own worth that you won't want to skip. I was raised in one of those sprawling houses in an affluent Boston suburb where the gloss of appearances was always polished more diligently than the truth of our lives. My parents, Richard and Eleanor, constructed their world on a foundation of social status and upward mobility. To anyone looking in, we were the quintessential upper-middle-class family. We had the meticulously coordinated outfits in our holiday cards and the impossibly green lawn that my father waged a weekly war to maintain. But behind the heavy oak front door, I always felt like an actress in a play I hadn't auditioned for, wearing a costume that was 2 sizes too small. My brother, Michael, was the firstborn, the golden child who dutifully followed our father into the lucrative world of finance. My sister, Sophia, became the brilliant surgeon our mother had dreamed of being before she chose marriage and motherhood. And then there was me, Elena, the creative, the one who found more truth in art and stories than in stock portfolios or surgical scalpels. The disappointment that clouded my parents' faces when I announced I was going to study design instead of law or medicine is an expression I can still summon with perfect clarity when I close my eyes. Art is a pastime, Elena, not a profession, my father would lecture, his voice lacquered with a familiar condescension. You can't build a life on that. My mother would then chime in with her signature brand of passive aggression. We just worry about you, darling. Not everyone has what it takes to make a real living from something so volatile. So at 18, I packed my bags and moved out, determined to prove them wrong. I put myself through college by juggling 3 jobs, while my siblings had their tuition paid in full and lived in comfortable apartments funded by our parents. There were nights I survived on 4 hours of sleep and weeks where my diet consisted of nothing but instant ramen. I never asked my parents for a single dollar, not even when I landed in the emergency room with a case of severe exhaustion. My pride and a stubborn resolve were the only family I had then. The beautiful irony is that by the time I was 30, I had built a design agency from the ground up that was out-earning both my brother's banking salary and my sister's surgical income combined. My company, Visionary Designs, had grown from a one-woman show in a cramped studio apartment to a powerhouse team of 28 incredible designers with a portfolio of high-profile clients across the country. Last year, we cleared well over 7 figures in profit. You'd think that kind of success would change their perspective, right? Not in the slightest. At family functions, they'd proudly introduce our son, Michael, the investment banker, and our daughter, Sophia, the gifted surgeon. I was just, and this is Elena. No title, no mention of my company, no acknowledgement of what I had built. If a guest dared to ask about my business, they'd offer a tight-lipped smile and expertly pivot the conversation to a more acceptable topic. Over the last few years, I'd been the one making a concerted effort to mend the fences. Not because I craved their approval anymore. I'd outgrown that need, but because I held on to the naive belief that having a relationship with my aging parents was the right thing to do. I started saying yes to more family gatherings, sent meticulously chosen gifts for birthdays and holidays, and made it a point to call them regularly. What they had no idea about, however, was that I was also their silent benefactor. 3 years ago, when my father was forced into an early retirement because of some health problems, and the mortgage payments became a source of constant anxiety, I set up an anonymous account. Every month, like clockwork, it deposited $3,500 into their bank account. My parents, in their blissful ignorance, just assumed it was some obscure retirement benefit they'd overlooked. When Sophia needed a hefty down payment for her dream house last year, I funneled $60,000 to her through a lawyer who presented it as a prestigious grant for medical professionals. And when Michael found himself drowning in student loan debt after a messy divorce, I quietly erased $75,000 of it, making it appear as if it were a bank-issued forgiveness program. Most recently, when my parents wistfully mentioned their upcoming 40th anniversary and how they wished they could afford a proper celebration, I saw my chance. I secretly contacted an event planner and arranged to cover half the cost of a lavish party at the Cliffside Manor, the most exclusive venue in the state. I instructed the planner to credit the contribution to the family as a whole, so my siblings could feel like they were part of the grand gesture, never knowing that I was the one footing the lion's share of the bill. I honestly, truly believed this party could be the turning point. Maybe, just maybe, seeing everyone together, celebrating in a place they loved, would finally start to heal the old fractures. Still, there were warning signs in the weeks leading up to the event, whispered phone calls that would abruptly end the moment I walked into a room, group text chains between my parents and siblings that I was conspicuously left out of. But I brushed it all off. I told myself I was just being overly sensitive, a side effect of a lifetime spent on the outside looking in. The week before the anniversary, as a final touch, I purchased their ultimate dream gift, a luxury European river cruise. It was a trip they'd talked about for decades but had always dismissed as an impossible fantasy. I had the tickets and itinerary placed in a beautiful gift box, wrote a heartfelt card, and felt a genuine flutter of excitement about giving it to them. For once, I thought, I could show my love and support openly, not from behind the veil of an anonymous transaction. I couldn't have been more wrong. The morning of my parents' anniversary party, I woke up with a sense of optimism I hadn't felt about a family gathering in years. I took my time getting ready, selecting a sophisticated midnight blue gown that was both elegant and understated. I styled my hair in a classic updo, applied my makeup with care, and chose a simple diamond necklace. Looking at my reflection, I allowed myself to hope that tonight would be the night they finally saw me. Not as the disappointing daughter who chose the wrong path, but as the accomplished woman I had become. The gift, the cruise tickets, was nestled in a silver envelope inside a small box wrapped in pearlescent paper with a ribbon that perfectly matched my dress. I'd even worked with the travel agent to create a special portfolio detailing all the prepaid excursions they could choose from: vineyard tours in France, historical walks in Germany, classical concerts in Vienna. It was a $12,000 gift I was more than happy to give, just for the chance to see pure, unadulterated joy on their faces. I arrived at the Cliffside Manor 30 minutes before the party's official start time. The restaurant was an architectural marvel, built into a cliff overlooking the ocean, its vast windows catching the last golden rays of the setting sun. Valets in crisp uniforms scurried to attend to arriving guests, and a doorman in a top hat held open the heavy ornate doors. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of lilies and old money. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling, casting a warm glow on the polished marble floors. This was the exact kind of place my parents adored, a place where prestige was the main course. "Good evening," I said to the hostess, my voice full of warmth. "I'm here for the Morrison anniversary party." She smiled politely and consulted a tablet, her manicured finger gliding down the screen. "I'm very sorry. I don't seem to have that name on the guest list. Could you spell it for me?" "Elena Morrison," I replied, a knot of unease beginning to tighten in my stomach. "I'm Richard and Eleanor's daughter." The hostess checked again, her professional smile wavering just a little. "I'm so sorry, Ms. Morrison, but your name isn't on the list that was provided by the hosts." A nervous laugh escaped my lips. "Oh, there must be a mistake. It's my parents' party." As I was speaking to her, I glanced over her shoulder into the main private dining hall. And there they were. My entire family was already gathered. My father, looking distinguished in his best suit, my mother, glowing in a silver gown, Michael and Sophia standing with their partners, all of them laughing with champagne flutes in their hands. And they weren't alone. There were dozens of other people, aunts, uncles, old family friends I recognized. At least 30 people were already there, mingling and enjoying themselves. Something was terribly, deeply wrong. The invitation had said 7 o'clock. It was only 6:30. Had they changed the time and forgotten to tell me? I made a split-second decision. "I'll just go in and talk to them," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "I'm sure it's just a simple mix-up." Before the hostess could object, I stepped past her and walked into the dining room, the gift box clutched in my hand like a shield. My mother was the first to spot me. Her smile instantly evaporated, her eyes widening with a look of pure, unadulterated alarm. She quickly tapped my father's arm and whispered something in his ear. He turned, and the jovial expression he'd been wearing curdled into a mask of cold fury. Michael and Sophia exchanged a panicked look, their bodies tensing. A ripple of silence spread through the room as conversations faltered, and all eyes turned to the unfolding drama. "Elena," my father's voice boomed into the sudden quiet. "What are you doing here?" I felt the weight of dozens of stares on me, my confusion giving way to a sickening, gut-wrenching realization. "It's Mom and Dad's anniversary," I said, my own voice sounding faint and distant. "Why wouldn't I be here?" My mother glided forward, her smile a brittle facade that didn't reach her eyes. "Sweetheart, we weren't expecting you. This is just a small get-together for our closest family and friends." Closest family. The two words struck me with the force of a physical blow. If this was for close family, then what on earth did that make me? Sophia wouldn't look at me, suddenly fascinated by the pattern on her cocktail napkin. Michael took a long, deliberate sip of his champagne. Neither of them said a word. Not a welcome, not a hint of surprise that I wasn't on the list. "There has to be a mistake," I said again, the beautifully wrapped gift now feeling like a lead weight in my hands. I even helped with the planning. My father's expression grew even darker. "There is no mistake, Elena. You were not invited." The silence that followed his declaration was absolute. All around us, guests were trying to pretend they weren't listening, while very obviously hanging on every word. My mother began twisting the pearl necklace at her throat, a nervous tic she'd had my entire life whenever things got uncomfortable. Sophia was now examining her manicure as if it were the most fascinating thing in the world, while Michael took another long swallow from his glass, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere over my shoulder. "I don't understand," I managed to say, my voice holding steady despite the hurricane of hurt and humiliation brewing inside me. "This is a family celebration. I am your daughter." My father took a step toward me, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper, but still loud enough for the nearest tables to hear. "This event is for people who are a genuine part of our lives, Elena. Not for someone who shows up when it's convenient for them and then vanishes." The sheer audacity of his accusation was breathtaking. I was the one who had been desperately trying to be a part of their lives for years. I was the one making the calls, arranging the visits, sending the gifts. "That's not fair," I protested, my voice starting to crack. "I have been trying so hard to be part of this family. I call you every single week. I visit whenever you'll have me." My mother finally spoke again, her tones syrupy sweet but her eyes like chips of ice. "Darling, this really isn't the time or the place for a discussion. This evening is very special for us. I saw some of their friends trading uncomfortable looks. Mrs. Gable, one of my mother's bridge partners, actually looked pained, while Dr. Evans, my father's golfing buddy, seemed to be studying his wine glass with an intensity I'd never seen before. "I brought you a present," I said, a last desperate attempt, holding out the gift box. "For your anniversary." My mother didn't even glance at it. "You can just leave it on the table over there with the others," she said, waving a dismissive hand toward a corner where a pile of gifts was stacked. I stood there, frozen, the gift still in my hand, feeling like a trespasser at an event that my own money had made possible. The public rejection, in front of their entire social circle, was a physical pain, a tightening in my chest that made it hard to breathe. "I think you should leave, Elena," my father said, his voice rising, no longer bothering with discretion. "You're making a scene and embarrassing everyone." "Embarrassing?" I repeated, the hurt finally bleeding into my voice. "I'm an embarrassment to you?" "You always did have a flair for the dramatic," he shot back, always needing to be the center of attention. I looked from my sister to my brother, pleading with my eyes for just one of them to intervene, to say something, anything. But they offered nothing. Sophia was now whispering to her husband, and Michael was suddenly engrossed in an urgent text message on his phone. "Fine," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'll go. But before I do, you should know something. I paid for half of this party. The venue, the caterer, the very champagne you're all drinking. That was me." My father's face turned a deep, blotchy red, but I couldn't tell if it was from anger or shame. That's absurd. Michael and Sophia took care of all the arrangements. When I just stared at him, not backing down, his expression twisted into something truly ugly. "Security!" he bellowed, waving at a man in a black suit near the entrance. "We have an uninvited guest who is causing a disturbance. I need her removed." A collective gasp went through the room. The security guard, a burly man who clearly hated his job at that moment, approached cautiously. "Sir," he said, looking from my father to me. "Please remove this person," my father commanded, pointing at me as if I were a complete stranger. "She crashed our private party and is making wild accusations." "Dad," I whispered, the shock finally shattering my composure. "You can't be serious." And that's when he delivered the final, unforgettable blow. Loud enough for everyone in that silent room to hear, with a clarity that left no room for doubt. "Get this beggar out of here," he snarled. "She's nothing but an embarrassment. Showing up where she's not wanted, lying about paying for things, probably looking for a handout." The shock in the room was palpable. Even the security guard flinched. "Mr. Morrison," the guard started, "maybe we could just handle this quietly." But my father was beyond reason. "Now," he demanded, "or I'll be having a word with your manager about the security standards at this establishment." I looked at my mother one last time, searching for a flicker of maternal instinct, a sign that she would stop this nightmare. But she just looked away, her social mask cemented in place. "It's all right," I said to the guard, pulling a shred of dignity from some deep, hidden reserve. "I'm leaving." I calmly walked over to the gift table, placed my beautifully wrapped present on top of the pile, straightened my shoulders, and walked toward the exit with deliberate, measured steps. Every nerve in my body was screaming at me to run, to flee the humiliation. But I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. As I passed the hostess stand, I caught my reflection in a large mirror. Outwardly, I still looked composed. No one would ever guess the utter devastation I felt inside. It wasn't until I was safely in my car in the dimly lit parking lot that the dam finally broke. I sat behind the wheel, my body shaking with uncontrollable sobs, as 32 years of trying to earn their love and approval came crashing down around me. Through my tear-blurred vision, I could see the warm glow of the restaurant windows. Inside, my family was already resuming their celebration, as if I had been nothing more than a brief, unpleasant interruption. I started the car and drove away, leaving behind more than just a party. I was leaving behind the last shred of hope that I would ever truly belong. The drive home was a blur. My mind kept replaying my father's words on a loop. Beggar, embarrassment, uninvited. Each one was a fresh stab to the heart. By the time I pulled into my own driveway, the initial shock and grief had started to curdle into something else. A cold, hard clarity that felt foreign, but also incredibly powerful. I sat in my car for a long moment, just looking at the house I had bought, the life I had built, all without a single ounce of their help. This home was my sanctuary, a physical manifestation of everything I had accomplished on my own terms. Inside, I kicked off my painful heels and went straight to my home office. I poured myself a large glass of Cabernet, sat down in my leather executive chair, and opened my laptop. It was time to take inventory. First, I logged into my online banking portal. And there it was, the recurring monthly transfer of $3,500 to my parents' account, neatly labeled retirement supplement. That was $42,000 a year they had accepted without question. For 3 years, a total of $126,000. Next, I opened the encrypted folder on my desktop labeled Family. Inside were the legal documents for Sophia's $60,000 grant and the confirmation of Michael's $75,000 student loan payoff. Then there were the other, smaller things I'd set up on autopay. The monthly premiums for their supplemental health insurance, the landscaping service that kept my father's lawn perfect, the housekeeping service that came twice a week because my mother's arthritis was acting up. All told, it was another $15,000 a year. And finally, the party itself. I pulled up the invoice from the event planner. My contribution had been exactly $25,000 for a party I was thrown out of. As I was staring at the grand total, a text message popped up on my phone. It was my cousin Sarah, who had apparently been deemed close family. "Hey, where'd you go? Your parents said you had a last-minute work emergency." So the cover story was already in place. How neat. Another text came through, this one from my Aunt Carol. "Elena, honey, are you okay? Just got here and heard you couldn't make it. Call me." They had invited extended family, but not me. The coldness of it was breathtaking. I took a deep breath, and with a steady hand, I made a decision. I opened my banking app and canceled the recurring monthly transfer to my parents. Then, I drafted a polite but firm email to the company that managed their landscaping and housekeeping, terminating the services effective immediately. One by one, I went through my credit card portals and canceled every subscription I paid for on their behalf. For Sophia's grant, the money was being dispersed in installments. I sent an email to the lawyer canceling the final $20,000 payment. Next, I called the travel agency's 24-hour line and canceled the European river cruise. The agent was sympathetic when I vaguely explained there had been a sudden family issue. The $12,000 refund would be credited back to my card. I then sent a concise email to my personal accountant. Effective immediately, please cease all financial disbursements to Richard Morrison, Eleanor Morrison, Michael Morrison, and Sophia Bell. Terminate any and all automatic payments or transfers from my accounts to theirs. He replied within 5 minutes. Consider it done. My final call was to the event planner for the anniversary party. Amanda, it's Elena Morrison. Elena, is everything okay? I was sure you'd be at the party by now. There's been a change of plans, I said, my voice eerily calm. I need you to inform the venue that my portion of the funding for tonight's event has been rescinded. Rescinded? But Elena, the party is happening as we speak. The deposits have all been paid. Then they will need to collect the remaining balance from the hosts of the event. As far as I am concerned, I am no longer one of them. After hanging up, I switched my phone to Do Not Disturb and poured another glass of wine. The entire process of dismantling years of one-sided support had taken less than an hour. Over $70,000 in immediate and future commitments, all gone. I felt a strange mix of profound grief and intoxicating liberation. It was the death of a hope I'd clung to for far too long, but it was also the birth of my freedom. As I sat there in my quiet, dark office, I had a crushing realization. I had spent years trying to buy the love of people who were fundamentally incapable of giving it freely. Tonight had simply held a magnifying glass to a truth that had always been there. In their world, I would never ever be enough. I took my wine and went to run a hot bath, letting the steaming water wash away the streaks of mascara and the invisible stain of their rejection. The fallout could wait until morning. For tonight, I would mourn the family I had always wanted, but never truly had. I woke the next morning to the bright sun streaming through my windows and an almost deafening silence. I'd left my phone on Do Not Disturb, and when I finally switched it off, it was like a dam breaking. The device vibrated nonstop for nearly a minute as a flood of notifications poured in. 36 missed calls, 17 voicemails, 42 text messages. The first voicemail was from my father, time-stamped at 11:30 p.m. the previous night. His voice was thick, slightly slurred from the expensive champagne I'd paid for. Elena, the restaurant manager is saying there's an issue with the payment. Call me back. The second, from 12:15 a.m., was far less controlled. What in the hell do you think you're doing? They're trying to charge us an extra $25,000. You need to fix this. Now. By the third voicemail at 1:20 a.m., he'd moved on to threats. If you don't sort this out by morning, there will be hell to pay. Your mother is in tears. I hope you're happy. The texts chronicled a similar descent into panic. My mother started around 2 a.m., a series of emotional pleas about how I was ruining their special night and how they just didn't understand why I would be so vindictive. My brother Michael chimed in at 3:12 a.m. What the actual hell, Elena? Mom and Dad just had to put the rest of the party on their credit card. Dad is having chest pains. Is this all because you weren't invited? For God's sake, grow up. Sophia's message arrived at 4:45 a.m. The bank just called Dad. Something about the mortgage payment for next month being canceled. What are you doing? By morning, the tone had shifted from outrage to desperation. My father's most recent voicemail was quiet, his voice raspy. Elena, we need to talk. Please call me. It's important. My mother had sent a text at 7:30 a.m. Sweetie, please call us. We're so confused. Your father is terribly worried about the mortgage. I put the phone down on the counter and calmly went about making coffee. My hands were perfectly steady. As the rich aroma filled my kitchen, I considered my next move. A part of me, the part that had been conditioned for 32 years, wanted to call them, to explain, maybe even to fix it. But I didn't. I got dressed for work, had a proper breakfast, and headed to my office. My company wouldn't run itself, and I had clients who depended on me. Their chaos was no longer my responsibility. The calls kept coming all morning. I told my assistant, Lisa, to inform any family members that I was in meetings and unavailable. By lunchtime, they had apparently started working their way through my contact list because I began getting concerned texts from cousins, old family friends, and even my mother's hairdresser. My cousin Sarah, who'd been at the party, showed up at my office unannounced. Elena, what is going on? She asked, her face a mask of confusion as she sat opposite my desk. Your parents are losing their minds. They're saying you cut off their mortgage payments and stuck them with a massive bill for the party. They're telling everyone you had some sort of mental breakdown. I took a long, slow breath. Sarah, did they happen to mention what happened at the party? That I showed up and my own father had me thrown out like a criminal? Her jaw dropped. What? No. They said you had a work emergency and couldn't make it. They acted all disappointed. That's not what happened, I said. And then I told her everything. The years of secret financial support, the hope I had for the party, the public humiliation. She listened, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief and finally to horror. He called security on you after you paid for half the party? That's monstrous. And you've been paying their mortgage for 3 years? And Sophia's down payment? And Michael's loans, she whispered. Number. They never said a word. They always talk about how much Michael and Sophia helped them out. Exactly, I said. Meanwhile, I'm the one keeping them afloat, all while being treated like the family failure. After Sarah left, promising to keep our conversation to herself, I tried to focus on work. It was almost 5 o'clock when my assistant buzzed. Ms. Morrison, your father is in the lobby. He doesn't have an appointment, but he's insisting. A knot of dread formed in my stomach, but I kept my voice even. Tell him I'm in a meeting and can't be disturbed. 10 minutes later, Lisa buzzed again, her voice strained. He's refusing to leave, Ms. Morrison. He says he'll wait all night if he has to. Then call building security and have him escorted out, I said coolly. If he becomes disruptive, that is. Just as I said it, my office door swung open. My father stood there, looking like a man completely unmoored. His usually impeccable suit was rumpled, his hair was a mess, and his eyes were bloodshot. Elena, he said, his voice hoarse, we need to talk. I stayed seated behind my large desk, a barrier between us. This is a place of business, Dad. You can't just barge in here. You left me no choice. You won't answer your phone. What have you done? I think you know exactly what I've done, I replied, surprised at my own calmness. I have stopped paying for a family that threw me away. He staggered forward, slumping into one of the chairs opposite me. This is some childish act of revenge. Your mother is a wreck. The mortgage company called. The landscaper just canceled. What are you trying to prove? I'm not trying to prove anything, I said. I'm simply no longer willing to bankroll people who would humiliate me publicly, call me a beggar, and not feel a shred of remorse. His face flushed with a dark, mottled red. I was upset. You showed up uninvited. To my own parents' anniversary party, I countered. A party I contributed $25,000 to. He just stared at me, his mind clearly unable to process the information. What are you talking about? Michael and Sophia planned it. Did they? I asked, opening a drawer and pulling out a file. Because I have the invoice right here. Just like I have 3 years of bank statements showing every mortgage payment, every insurance bill, every dollar I've poured into this family while you all pretended I didn't exist. For the first time in my entire life, I saw my father utterly speechless. He looked small, old, and defeated. Why? He finally whispered. Why wouldn't you tell us? Would it have made a difference? I shot back. Would you have treated me with respect? Or would you have just expected more? He had no answer. After a long, heavy silence, I stood up. I have a dinner meeting. I need to go. Elena, please, he begged, his voice cracking. Your mother and I, we can't afford the house on our own. We're on a fixed income. Then perhaps it's time to downsize, I said, gathering my things. Or you could ask your 2 successful children for help. I'm sure Michael and Sophia would be happy to support the parents they so clearly adore. As I walked to the door, he made one last, desperate plea. We're still your parents. I paused, with my hand on the doorknob. Yes, you are, I said, turning back to look at him. But being family is not a blank check. It doesn't entitle you to my money, and it certainly doesn't give you the right to treat me like I'm worthless. I left him sitting there in my office, a shrinking figure in a world he no longer controlled. And as the elevator doors slid shut, I realized I had finally spoken my truth to him without fear and without needing his approval. It was terrifying, and it was liberating. 3 days passed in relative silence. The frantic calls had stopped, replaced by a few tentative text messages from my mother, her tone a bizarre mix of confusion and wounded pride. I kept my replies brief and factual. I half expected them to find another solution and for our relationship to settle back into its familiar pattern of cold distance. I did not expect all 4 of them to show up at my office on the 4th day. I was in the middle of a major client presentation when Lisa knocked and entered, her expression apologetic. I'm so sorry to interrupt, Ms. Morrison, but your family is here. My family, I repeated. Your parents, your brother, and your sister. They're all in the lobby. They say they won't leave until they speak with you. My clients exchanged curious glances. I apologized, requested a 15-minute recess, and walked out to the lobby. The scene was surreal. My father, looking grim. My mother, perched on the edge of a chair as if ready to bolt. Michael, pacing restlessly by the window. And Sophia, pretending to study the design awards displayed on my wall. This is my workplace, I said, my voice low but firm. This is not the time or place. We tried calling, Michael snapped. You've been ignoring us. I've been working, I retorted, running the business that apparently none of you think is a real job. My father stepped forward. Elena, we need to sort this out, as a family. I glanced around at my employees, who were all trying their best not to stare. Not here, I said. I have clients waiting. Then when? Sophia demanded. You won't take our calls? You won't meet with us? Meanwhile, Mom and Dad are getting delinquency notices. Her accusation lit a fuse. Delinquency notices? After only 3 days? That's highly unlikely, Sophia. But then, this family has always had a taste for the dramatic. My mother stood up, her eyes welling with tears. Please, Elena, We just want to talk." I sighed, feeling a headache coming on. "Fine." The small conference room at the end of the hall. "Wait there. I'll come when I can." 20 minutes later, after profusely apologizing to my clients and rescheduling their meeting, I walked into the conference room and closed the door. The four of them sat around the polished table, shrouded in a tense, uncomfortable silence. "You have 30 minutes, I said, choosing to remain standing. "I have another appointment." My father cleared his throat. "We need to discuss these financial arrangements you had in place, the ones we knew nothing about." "What is there to discuss?" I asked. I was helping. Now I'm not. "It's that simple." "But why would you keep it a secret?" my mother asked, her voice trembling. "Would it have mattered?" I countered. "Would you have suddenly respected my career? Would you have started inviting me to things? Or would you have just seen it as your due?" The silence was my answer. Sophia spoke up, her voice tight with a mixture of shame and indignation. "So this is just punishment then? Because you weren't invited to the party?" "No, Sophia. This is a consequence. It's the consequence for years of being treated like an afterthought, which culminated in my own father having me physically removed from an event I helped pay for and calling me a beggar in front of 30 people while my own siblings said nothing." "We didn't know you paid for it," Michael interjected. "And would that have been the only reason to speak up?" I challenged him. He had the decency to look away. "Let me ask you all something," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "Did any of you ever wonder how Mom and Dad were affording that house and their lifestyle on Dad's retirement income? Did you ever wonder where Sophia's $60,000 grant came from? Or how Michael's student debt just magically vanished?" The dawning comprehension on their faces was almost painful to watch. "That was you?" Michael asked quietly. I just nodded. "All of it. Over $260,000 in the past 3 years. My mother let out a strangled sob. "But why, Elena? Why do all that and never tell us?" "Because I wanted to help without it being a transaction," I said, my voice rising. "Because I knew that even if I told you, you'd find a way to minimize it, to act like it was less important than if Michael or Sophia had given you $1,000. My father, who had been silent, finally spoke. "I just don't understand why you would give so much if you felt so unappreciated." The raw simplicity of his question stopped me in my tracks. "Because," I said, my voice softening, "that's what I thought family did. They show up for each other. I kept hoping that if I just kept giving, eventually something would click. Eventually I would be enough." My mother began to weep openly. "I never knew. I never meant to make you feel that way. But you did," I said, looking at each of them in turn. "All of you did. Every time you dismissed my work, every time you praised them and questioned me, every time I was left out. The party wasn't an isolated incident. It was just the final straw. We didn't invite you," my father started, then faltered, "because your mother was worried." "Worried about what?" I demanded. My mother wiped her eyes with a tissue. "That you would outshine us," she confessed in a small, broken voice. "Your success, your confidence. You're not the same person you were. I was afraid our friends would see how well you've done and wonder why we never brag about you the way we do about Michael and Sophia." The confession was a punch to the gut. All this time, I thought they were ashamed of my choices. It had never once occurred to me that they were intimidated by my success. "So you pushed me away because I was too successful?" "It wasn't rational," she admitted. "It was pride and fear and, yes, jealousy. You built this incredible thing all by yourself. It made me question the choices I'd made." Michael leaned forward. "For what it's worth, I had no idea you paid off my loans. I swear, I would have thanked you." Would you have? I asked gently. Or would you have been embarrassed that your little sister had to bail you out? His silence was answer enough. Sophia, ever the pragmatist, cut to the chase. So, are you going to restart the payments? The mortgage? No, I said. The word solid and final. That part of my life is over. If you want to help Mom and Dad, the two of you are welcome to step up. I've carried this family long enough. We can't afford to help them like you were, Catherine admitted. Not with my kids' tuition and James's expenses. Then that's a problem for you all to solve, I said. Now, if you'll excuse me, my 30 minutes are up. As they got up to leave, my father paused. The party. The manager said someone called and withdrew the funding during the event. Was that you? Yes, I said. After you had me escorted out, I withdrew my contribution. I assume they charged the balance to the credit card on file. That would be mine, he said quietly. $25,000. Money I don't have. Again, I said, holding the conference room door open. Not my problem. You made your choice. I finally made mine. My mother was the last to leave. She stopped in front of me, her eyes red and swollen. I'm so sorry, Elena. Truly. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of something other than anger. I know, Mom, I said softly, but sorry doesn't fix this. She nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek, and followed the others out, leaving me alone in the doorway of the room where all our family's ugly truths had finally been laid bare. 2 weeks passed. In that time, I felt a strange combination of grief and lightness. I threw myself into my work, landing a huge new client, and I spent my evenings with friends who had always seen and valued me for who I was. The first family member to reach out was, surprisingly, Michael. His text was simple. Can we get coffee? Just us. We met at a quiet cafe. He was already there with 2 cups when I arrived. Vanilla latte, he said. Still your favorite? The small act of remembering touched a part of me I thought had died. Thanks, I said. How are things? Complicated, he admitted. Mom and Dad are selling the house. They found a condo. They can't afford the mortgage. And Sophia and we just can't cover it. I nodded, waiting. I wanted to apologize, he said, looking down into his cup. For the party, for all of it. I knew it was wrong that you weren't invited, but I didn't say anything. It's always been easier to not rock the boat. He then confessed something that stunned me. I've always been jealous of you, you know. Of your freedom. I wanted to study music, but Dad pushed me into finance. I married a woman he and Mom approved of, and look how that turned out. You went and built the life you wanted. For the first time, I saw my brother not as the golden child, but as another victim of the same system. My sister, Sophia, was next. Her approach was less about apology and more about justification. You were always so difficult, Elena, she said over a tense lunch. Always challenging things. That's not a reason to let Dad call me a beggar, I replied. She had the grace to look ashamed. No, she admitted. That was awful. I should have said something. She confessed that my success had threatened the family narrative where she was the successful daughter. It was easier for her when I was the struggling artist. By the end of our lunch, it wasn't a reconciliation, but it was a start. My mother came to my house a few days later, alone. She looked smaller, more fragile. The house is under contract, she said quietly. We found a nice condo. It's a relief in a way. Then the confession I never expected came pouring out. I was jealous of you, she whispered, tears in her eyes. Of your courage. I gave up my own dreams to marry your father. I told myself it was the right choice. But every time you succeeded, it felt like a judgment on the life I settled for. It was easier to push you down than to face my own regrets. Her raw honesty broke something open inside me. I finally understood. "Mom," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "I never judged you. I just wanted to be free." "I know that now," she cried, reaching for my hand, "and I am so, so proud of the woman you've become." My father was the last. He asked to meet at a park, on a bench overlooking a pond. He was stiff and awkward. "I'm not good at apologies," he began gruffly. "The things I said, they were unforgivable." "Then why did you say them?" I asked. He sighed, a long, heavy sound. "Pride. When you walked in, looking so successful, I panicked. We had deliberately cut you out, and you showing up in front of everyone was a public humiliation of our decision. So I lashed out." He finally looked at me. "The truth is, Elena, I never understood you, and I was always afraid of what I couldn't control. It wasn't the apology I had dreamed of, but it was honest." "Would you," he asked hesitantly before we left, "consider coming for dinner? At the new condo?" "Just family." I paused. "I'll think about it," I said. 2 months after that disastrous anniversary party, we had dinner at my parents' new, smaller condo. It was awkward and quiet at times, but it was real. Michael brought his new girlfriend, a music teacher. Sophia came alone. We weren't the picture-perfect family anymore. We were something messier, more complicated, and infinitely more authentic. I never resumed the financial support. They never asked. Our relationship is still a work in progress, but it's being rebuilt on a foundation of respect, not obligation. I learned that my worth isn't determined by their approval. By walking away from a dynamic that demanded I fund my own exclusion, I finally claimed my own value. True family, I've discovered, isn't about what you can give. It's about mutual respect, even when it's difficult. I'd love to hear your stories about setting boundaries or standing up for yourself within your family. Have you ever had to make that hard choice between keeping the peace and preserving your self-worth? Please share your experiences in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with anyone who might need a reminder of their own value. Thank you for listening, and remember, you are worthy of love and respect exactly as you are.